The evening began without fanfare, without the sharp crack of drama, yet the silence that settled in carried a weight all its own, the kind that presses inward and leaves you hyper-aware of your own heartbeat. Outside the towering glass walls of the executive floor, Chicago glittered under a canopy of city lights, and in the space between the distant chime of closing elevators and the low, persistent drone of overhead fluorescence, a quiet moment arrived that would reshape two lives more profoundly than either could have imagined. It started with something as trivial as a torn skirt and a collision between pride and the raw edges of vulnerability. Before going any further, take a beat to consider this. If you believe that kindness still thrives when no eyes are watching, that second chances often wear the disguise of minor setbacks, and that people can still choose respect over instinct, then take a second to engage with this story. Leave a comment with your own reflections, share it with someone who might need a reminder of hope, and subscribe to the channel. These narratives continue to exist because there are still those who hold onto the belief that goodness is not a relic of the past. She was a woman who had built her life on precision and command. Margaret Collins had carved her reputation from steel and ambition, climbing from a young intern in borrowed heels to the youngest female chief executive ever appointed by her firm. She commanded boardrooms with crisp clarity, anticipated market shifts with unflinching decisiveness, and saw her face in headlines that often mixed admiration with a quiet undercurrent of resentment. Yet on that particular evening, after a charity gala hosted by her own company in downtown Chicago, that ironclad control slipped away in the most trivial and cruel manner. As she exited her car and ascended the marble staircase back into the office to collect documents she had forgotten, a harsh, ripping sound pierced the stillness and sliced through her composure. It was a noise no one else would have noticed, but she felt it instantly, like a hairline fracture spreading across a suit of armor. Alone in the hollow vastness of the office, she stood with her hands pressed flat against her desk, her pulse quickening not from the fear of public embarrassment, but from something far more unsettling. The tear ran along the side seam, subtle but unmistakable, exposing a fraction more of herself than she had ever allowed the world to witness. In a universe where her mistakes were tallied in millions of dollars, this tiny failure felt excruciatingly intimate. For a moment she considered calling her driver, abandoning the documents, or simply pretending it had never occurred. But the reality was simple and stubbornly unyielding. She required assistance, and that assistance demanded a leap of trust she was not sure she possessed. That trust arrived in the form of Andrew Walker, the nocturnal facilities coordinator who moved through the building after hours, replacing light bulbs, tidying up, and stitching together the minor crises everyone else left behind. Andrew was not unseen, but the world often treated him as if he were. He had once harbored ambitions of becoming an engineer, once believed that hard work would inevitably lead to reward, but life had rerouted him through a maze of hospital bills, fractured family ties, and the resigned acceptance of a job that kept him afloat. Still, he carried a quiet gentleness, the kind that only comes from disappointment endured without surrendering to bitterness. Margaret had noticed him before, though she could not have pinpointed when. Perhaps it was the way he acknowledged her with a respectful nod that expected nothing in return, or the way he handled her office with the care of a place meant for purpose rather than a throne of power. When she encountered him that night, she felt a strange tightening in her chest, an emotion she could not immediately name. The situation was painfully awkward, yet in the profound quiet of that empty corridor, it transformed into something else entirely. There were no raised voices, no flustered attempts at explanation, just two individuals standing on the precipice of an unintended moment that demanded nothing less than integrity. What followed was not scandal or temptation, but restraint. Andrew turned his back as she asked, his posture a silent bastion of respect, and he explained with calm precision what needed to be done to prevent the damage from spreading further. His hands moved with the careful expertise of a tailor, mending more than just torn fabric, repairing her fractured sense of dignity one meticulous stitch at a time. Margaret stood beneath the unflattering glare of the fluorescent lights and felt tears prick at her eyes, not from shame, but from an overwhelming tide of relief at being treated as a human being rather than a public spectacle. In that fleeting instant, the power dynamic she had spent her entire career navigating simply dissolved. She ceased to be the chief executive, and he ceased to be the man who emptied her wastebasket. They were just two people, sharing a fragile, unguarded truth about what it meant to be vulnerable. Margaret realized in that raw moment how rarely she permitted herself to be seen without her defenses, and how exhausting it had been to carry perfection around like a shield. Andrew, meanwhile, felt a stirring he had not allowed himself in years, a sense of usefulness that carried real meaning. After that night, nothing changed immediately, and yet everything was profoundly different. The skirt was fixed, the documents retrieved, and they parted without ceremony or awkward promises. But Margaret found herself seeking him out more often, learning his name, offering thanks with a sincerity that caught both of them off guard. Andrew found himself walking with a straighter posture, reminded that decency still held value even when it went unseen. Their paths crossed in small, unremarkable ways, in shared elevator rides and exchanged smiles, but the memory of that night lingered like a quiet vow. The obstacles they faced were not cinematic, but profoundly human. Margaret wrestled with the isolation of the corner office and the nagging suspicion that people's admiration often masked hidden resentment. Andrew grappled with the weight of invisibility and the fear that his best years had passed him by without anyone noticing. Yet each of them carried forward the seed of transformation planted by that single act of mutual respect. Margaret began mentoring young women with a renewed sense of empathy, shifting her message from invincibility to resilience, from armor to authenticity. Andrew enrolled in night classes, buoyed by the reminder that his hands and his mind still possessed value. As weeks turned into months, the company itself seemed to grow a little softer around the edges. Small policies shifted, names were remembered, and individuals felt truly seen. Margaret came to understand that true leadership was not about standing above others, but about standing firm when someone needed you to look away, to honor their dignity without hesitation or question. Andrew learned that self-worth could be reclaimed not through external recognition, but through integrity practiced in the quiet shadows. Just before this story draws to a close, take a moment to share in the comments what this narrative stirred within you. Your thoughts carry more weight than you realize. The final encounter arrived quietly, as meaningful things often do. Margaret passed Andrew in the lobby one morning, both clutching cups of coffee, both wearing smiles that spoke of a shared and unspoken understanding. No words were exchanged, and none were necessary. The torn skirt had faded from memory, but the lesson it held remained embroidered into the fabric of their lives. If this story touched something in your heart, if it served as a reminder that kindness can bloom even in the most uncomfortable moments, please take a moment to like, share, and engage with this video. Your support is what keeps stories like this alive. Stories that remind us that dignity is not bestowed by titles or stripped away by circumstance, but preserved by the quiet choices we make when we believe no one else is watching.